The fire alarm screamed through the 40th floor of the Aurelia Towers, and Patricia Duval was already on the ground, crawling toward a door that wouldn't budge, smoke pressing into her lungs like fists. 3 minutes. That's all the fire captain would later say she had left before the smoke alone would have killed her. 3 minutes. And the man who broke through that door with an axe in his hand and fear nowhere on his face had no idea he was about to save the life of one of the richest women in the world. He just saw a woman on the floor, and he moved. That single moment. Seo-joon Park hauling Patricia Duval over his shoulder and running through fire that was eating the building alive behind them, would end up on every news channel by morning. But what nobody knew yet, what nobody could have predicted, was that this wasn't where the story ended. It was where it began. A billionaire and a firefighter. A woman who owned skyscrapers and a man who ran into burning ones. 2 people from opposite ends of the world, about to be pulled into a love story that the internet would try, again and again, to burn to the ground. Before we go further, if stories about real heroes and real love still move you, hit that like button right now, because this one is going to take you through all of it, the fire, the fury, the betrayal, and the grace at the end that nobody saw coming. Now let's go back to where it started. The fire had begun 3 floors below Patricia's penthouse office. A faulty electrical line sparking behind a wall nobody had inspected in 11 years. By the time the alarms went off, it had already eaten through 2 floors of insulation and was climbing fast. Patricia had been on a call with her legal team, finalizing the acquisition of a mid-sized logistics company, when the first wisps of smoke slid under her office door. She thought it was a drill. Aurelia Towers ran drills constantly. It wasn't until she opened the door and the hallway hit her like an oven that she understood this was real. She tried the stairwell first. Locked, sealed by a fire door that had jammed from heat warping the frame. She tried the elevator next, forgetting in her panic that elevators never work during a fire, and stood there slamming the call button while smoke thickened around her ankles. By the time she remembered to get low, to crawl, black smoke had swallowed the ceiling and was reaching for the floor. Seo-joon's unit arrived 9 minutes after the first call. 9 minutes that, for Patricia, felt like hours. He wasn't supposed to be the one who went up. His captain had already marked the top floors as unsafe for entry, called it a loss, ordered the team to focus on containment instead of extraction. But Seo-joon had seen the building's occupancy logs. Someone was still up there. He made a choice in half a second that would define the rest of his year. He went in anyway. He found her half-conscious near the elevator bank, her silk blouse soaked with sweat, her hands scraped raw from clawing at a jammed door. He didn't ask who she was. He didn't have time to. He picked her up, wrapped his coat around her face, and ran. They made it out as the ceiling behind them collapsed. Cameras from 3 different news vans caught the moment he laid her down on the pavement, checked her pulse, and stayed with her until the paramedics pushed him aside. He didn't know her name yet. She didn't know his. But somewhere in that chaos, something had already shifted. If you've ever wondered whether real courage still exists in this world, drop a comment below and tell me what you'd have done in his position, because what Seo-joon did next is the part most people get wrong. He said no to everything. The fire department's PR office wanted him for interviews. Local news wanted an exclusive. A daytime talk show offered a 5-figure appearance fee just to have him sit on a couch and describe what it felt like to save a billionaire's life. He turned every single one down. 3 days after the fire, while Patricia was still in the hospital recovering from smoke inhalation, Seo-joon was back on shift, running calls like nothing had happened. That refusal was the first thing that truly rattled Patricia. She was used to people wanting something from her: money, access, a photo, a favor. She had built an entire defense system around that expectation. But this man had pulled her from a burning building and then vanished, refusing even the basic acknowledgement most people would have chased. It didn't sit right with her. It also didn't leave her mind. She had her assistant track down which station he worked out of. Not to pay him. Not yet. Just to say thank you properly. The way she hadn't been able to with a fire mask over her face and paramedics pulling her away. She showed up at Station 14 on a Tuesday afternoon with lunch for the entire crew. No cameras, no publicist, no entourage. Just her, a stack of containers, and a nervous energy she wasn't used to feeling. Seo-joon was cleaning equipment in the garage bay when she walked in. He looked up, recognized her instantly, and the first thing he said wasn't gracious or warm. It was blunt. "You didn't need to come here." "I wanted to," Patricia said. "You saved my life and disappeared. That's not something I let go easily. I did my job. Your captain called it a loss. You went in anyway." He didn't answer that. He just looked at her like he was trying to figure out what angle she was working, because in his experience people with money always had one. Patricia noticed the look and something in her chest tightened, because she recognized it. It was the same look she gave people who wanted something from her. "I'm not here to make you a headline," she said quietly. "I just wanted to say thank you to your face." That was the moment the tension started to shift from suspicion into something else. Not trust yet, but curiosity. He offered her a seat on the equipment bench, mostly out of instinct, and for the next 20 minutes they talked, not about the fire but about small things. He told her, reluctantly at first, about growing up in Busan, about moving to the US for his mother's medical treatment, about how firefighting was the only job that made the constant fear he carried feel like it had a purpose. She told him almost nothing about her own life, deflecting every question about her company, her family, her billions, until he finally said, half joking, "You ask a lot of questions for someone who won't answer any." She laughed for the first time since the fire. That laugh became the thing he thought about on his next 3 shifts. If this story is already pulling at something in you, go ahead and subscribe, because what happens next tests both of them harder than that fire ever did. Over the following weeks, their visits became a pattern neither of them planned. She'd bring food. He'd show her small, practical things, how to check a smoke detector's battery, how to stop, drop, and roll properly, things she'd never needed to know until 3 minutes in a burning stairwell taught her how fragile her control over her own life actually was. In return, she started opening up in small doses, telling him about board members who saw her as a liability because of how she looked walking into rooms full of old money, about a father who built an empire and left her holding the weight of it before she was ready. There was a night, maybe 5 weeks after the fire, when the station had a slow shift and Seo-joon walked her out to her car after midnight. Neither of them said much, but when she turned to say goodnight, he reached out and gently brushed a piece of ash-colored dust off her shoulder. Remnant habit from years of checking gear, and his hand lingered half a second too long. She noticed. He noticed that she noticed. Neither of them moved away. "This is a bad idea," he said quietly, not moving his hand. "Probably," she said. "I don't really do bad ideas." "Neither do I." Neither of them said anything else. But something had crossed a line that night that couldn't be walked back. 2 people who had spent their entire lives building walls against being used had, without meaning to, let each other in. It didn't stay quiet for long. 3 weeks later, a business associate of Patricia's, a man named Robert Kessler, whom she'd blocked from a hostile buyout of a family-owned shipping company the year before, found out about her connection to Seo-joon and saw an opportunity. Kessler had spent a year nursing a grudge, watching Patricia's reputation only grow stronger. And now he had something he could use. He didn't need much, just a seed of doubt planted in the right place. He leaked a story to a tabloid outlet, backed by what looked like altered department records, suggesting Seo-joon had prior knowledge of faulty wiring in Aurelia Towers before the fire even started, implying the entire rescue had been staged, timed for maximum publicity, possibly even for an insurance payout tied to Patricia's real estate holdings. It was a lie built on just enough technical language to sound credible to people who wanted to believe the worst. The story spread in hours, not days. That's how it works now. A headline doesn't need to be true, it just needs to be shareable. By morning, Seo-joon's name was trending next to words like staged hero and billionaire's fraud plot. His fire department, terrified of liability, suspended him pending an internal investigation before they'd even seen real evidence. Comment sections filled with strangers calling him a con artist, calling Patricia a woman who'd bought herself a fake fairy tale for PR. He didn't call her. He didn't answer his phone at all for 2 days. If you're the kind of person who's tired of watching good people get destroyed by other people's lies, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe, because what Patricia does next is where this story stops being soft. She found him on the 3rd day, sitting alone in his apartment with the blinds drawn, a suspension letter on the table in front of him. He looked up at her with something she hadn't seen on his face before. Not anger, but exhaustion. The specific exhaustion of a man who had run into a burning building without hesitation and was now being called a liar for it. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Being near me right now is bad for you. I don't care what it's bad for. Patricia." "No." Her voice cracked, just slightly, the first real crack he'd heard from her. "You ran into a building that was actively collapsing to save someone you didn't even know, and now you're sitting here letting them call you a liar. I'm not doing that. I won't." Here was the part that mattered. Patricia had the resources to end this instantly. Her legal team could subpoena the original, unaltered fire department records within a day. But doing that publicly meant exposing exactly how Kessler had gotten access to those records in the first place. And that trail led directly back to a data-sharing agreement her own late father had signed years earlier, one that, if scrutinized, would expose questionable practices buried deep in her family's company history. Protecting Seo-joon meant risking her own empire's carefully guarded image. It meant handing critics of her company exactly the kind of scandal they'd been hoping to find for years. She chose him anyway. She called an emergency press conference 48 hours later. No script, no PR team standing beside her, just Patricia at a podium with the real, unaltered records displayed behind her, walking reporters through exactly how the documents had been doctored and exactly who had leaked them. She named Kessler directly. She admitted, on camera, to the flaw in her own family's data practices that had made the leak possible in the first place, taking the hit publicly rather than let it stay buried and let Seo-joon carry the blame alone. "I would rather you know the truth about my family's mistakes," she told the room, "than let an innocent man lose everything because it was convenient for someone to lie about him." The room went silent for a second before the questions exploded. By the end of the week, Seo-joon was fully reinstated, his record cleared, his name restored. Kessler, exposed and facing his own legal fallout, disappeared from public life entirely. But the win didn't come free. Two of Patricia's biggest institutional investors pulled out over the scandal her admission had triggered, costing her company nearly a year's projected growth. She never once brought it up to Seo-joon as a debt he owed her. She simply let it be the cost of doing the right thing. He showed up at her office 2 days after the press conference, past the point where his reinstatement even required it. He stood in her doorway, still in uniform, looking like a man who didn't know exactly what he wanted to say. "You didn't have to burn your own name to save mine," he said. "I know," she said. "I did it anyway. Why?" She looked at him for a long moment before answering, and when she did, her voice was steadier than either of them expected. "Because the day you ran into that building, you didn't know who I was and it didn't matter to you. You just went in. I wanted to be someone who did the same for you." Neither of them said the word love yet, but it was sitting in the room with them, undeniable, the way smoke fills a space before you ever see the flame. The final piece of this story didn't come with cameras or headlines. Months later, Patricia quietly funded the full reconstruction of a rundown fire station on the edge of the city, one that had been operating with outdated equipment and half its trucks in disrepair for over a decade. She didn't put her name on it. She didn't tell Seo-joon what she was doing. He found out the way everyone else did, standing in the crowd at the small reopening ceremony, watching new engines roll into a rebuilt garage bay, when someone from the city council thanked an anonymous donor for making it possible. He found her standing quietly at the edge of the crowd afterward, deliberately out of the spotlight. "You didn't tell me," he said. "I didn't do it for credit. You never do." He stepped closer, closer than he had that night outside the station months ago. "I've spent my whole life thinking love was something that happened to other people. People with quiet lives, simple lives. Not people like me who run into fires for a living. Not people like you who everyone wants something from. And now?" she asked. "Now I think I've been in love with you since the moment you laughed at me in that garage bay, and I've been too stubborn to say it." Patricia didn't say anything right away. She just reached out, the way he had that first night, and let her hand rest against his. This time, neither of them pulled away, and neither of them needed to say anything else. The crowd around them was celebrating new fire trucks and a rebuilt station, completely unaware that the two people standing quietly at the edge of it had just found their way to the beginning of something neither of them had been looking for, and both of them had needed. In a world quick to burn people down over a headline, over a lie, over jealousy dressed up as a scandal, Patricia and Seo-joon chose something harder. They chose grace over revenge, truth over silence, and each other over everything the world tried to take from them. If this story moved you even a little, comment the word grace below and let me know, because stories like this are proof that even after everything tries to burn it down, real love finds a way to survive the fire.